Gentlemen, wonderful to have you here. Thank you. Please take a seat. Now, I have had the fortune of meeting these fine gentlemen before, but I would like to introduce them to you as well. From left to right, we've got Tuno Grünberg, who is the CEO of Greenergy Data Centers, which is home of the most energy efficient and secure data center in the Baltics. Then we've got Taavi Tamkivi, who is the co-founder and CEO of Salve, a startup on a mission to beat financial crime through next-level anti-money laundering. And we have Csaba Virag. I hope I got that correct. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. The Chief Strategy Officer for Cybersecurity at Nortal, which is a leading company supporting Fortune 500 enterprises and digital societies around the world. And we've got Samuel Ojeme, who is the Director of Product Management for Cyber and Intelligence Solutions at MasterCard. I don't think I need to introduce that company to anyone. Thank you very much for joining me on this stage. I want to start with a more general question that we can all address. In general, we've experienced digital transformation in its nascency in 20 years ago, more recently and more actively 10 years ago. We've seen a push in more and more countries. Have we been paying sufficient and equal attention to physical and digital infrastructure alike as we start providing solutions to the world? Maybe we start from the left-hand side to the audience.
Yeah, thank you. I think we haven't really paid too much attention to the physical side, as we more concentrate, in my mind at least, to the data protection itself, which of course is paramount importance. But I think the physical side is a little bit suffering from the attention at least. So every bit of information needs to reside somewhere, and it has to be a very safe place. So that's why, if we look at, we are kind of used to that all online transactions and everything like happening, e-service of governments, everything is like that. But actually they are somewhere, in some places, hidden maybe from the sight of the public, and it's really important that we keep also track on those parts. So probably this part actually needs more attention on my side. Of course, both. I mean, cybersecurity of data itself is absolutely number one, because without this, there is nothing to protect, actually. So that's both.
Absolutely, and I think what I would like to hear more from Taavi, Csaba, and Samuel about is to what extent do you hear when you deal with potential customers and existing clients as well? We're talking about financial data, we're talking about government data, potentially, pretty high-level stuff. To what extent do they ask about the physical component about it?
Yes, it's a good question. Short answer is that they're not asking too much about physical side of things. Of course, they care about this, but they don't ask comparing to digital side of things. What we're doing is we are allowing banks and fintechs to exchange really sensitive data about their suspicious customers. And that's very, very sensitive information about KYC, transactions, money moving back and forth. And of course, banks care a lot about security of their data, which we do process. But actually, when going into details, what are the risks and what are the mitigations, it's super long questionnaires and super heavy regulatory standards that we need to meet and all of that. And this is fine, but actually quite often we see that the cultural part is underestimated. And there is one of my favorite saying is that culture eats the strategy for the breakfast, meaning that strategy is still important, policies and procedures and following your technical security measures. But if people don't care, people don't understand why security measures are important, and they don't react accordingly, then all this strategy is quite pointless. And we've seen many, many times happening, not in our house, but we've heard the stories. But also just random tests, when opening a new office and 2 months in and someone comes to elevator and it might be visitor, it might be good visitor, but actually it might be not so good visitor who wants to come to office. And are the employees who are traveling in the same elevator, are they asking who are you or who are visiting or not? So this kind of things, you can write it down, the policies, but actually if people don't care about these physical things, people coming to your office, then it's digital, access to digital assets is quite trivial actually already after that point. And there are many other examples where we see that actually people tend to underestimate the physical risks which are coming from lack of knowledge and lack of culture in that space.
And I suppose, seeing as you've got AML regulations that are quite uniform, I would say, but there's still a very different interpretation across borders when you deal with clients. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, like it's the wider space is so exciting. I'm a mathematician myself, but I never believed that I could be excited by the laws and by the regulatory things. But I do, because like there is like in European space and in the UK as well, there's like privacy, GDPR policies and GDPR-driven laws which protect our personal data. And I'm super happy to have GDPR in place because I feel much safer when I'm giving my data to someone. And there is always AML, anti-money laundering, which is actually encouraging our banks to exchange more information and process more information. So there is a natural conflict between the GDPR and AML. And when it comes to data security, then again, it's another triangle, another corner of this triangle when like we need to keep data secure while processing personal, super sensitive data, and what are technologies which are meeting the AML expectations and GDPR expectations, and like data protection officers and information security officers, how do they work together, and how do they prioritize like mutual, maybe sometimes conflicts of interest. That's actually a really interesting puzzle to resolve. And in the companies or like institutions which are dealing with really sensitive data, I think maybe there are not too many best practices which would scale and which would be compliant and really well accepted by the different countries around us and different customer segments around us as well. So every time, like there is almost need to build it up from scratch again.
Yeah. Csaba, what is your experience with this question?
I might have a different point of view here.
That's what we're all here for. If we all want to agree on everything, then yeah, I go somewhere else.
So when you mentioned or coined the term physical security, the very first thing that popped into my mind is not access physically to some kind of data or some kind of bits and bytes, but actually the physical infrastructure that it's relying on, plus how actually we humans should be thinking of how we think of our interaction with IT. Specifically more like operational technology, so IoT and any device that we use. And when you say physical security, for me a car that is unmanned and is driving on its own autonomously, that's a physical security question as well. And drones can fall down, satellites can fall down and get into each other. And we as humans and humanity, we are building everything smart. So if you don't have smart in what you're offering, it's from last centuries. But when it comes to actually having a smart city, my understanding, it's as smart as the people who are living in it. So culturally, we have to be ready to actually adopt, understand what interaction with these technologies, physical devices, smart metering, cars, smart light systems, smart elevators, whatever we can, we try to automate to make our life actually comfortable. But what people don't necessarily think of, what will happen if that automation is failing. And the very basic everyday action is when you go home and something that is automated is not working. Let it be your blinder, your gate, your whatever, but it's just an annoyance. And then you have to figure out, okay, how do I open my car gate without, the remote? Back then it was easy, you just went there and pulled, but now you have to find the key to unlock the mechanism that actually allows you to unlock it. Now think of it on a city level. You have buses autonomously driving citizens from point A to point B, and that bus fails to work. You cannot go there and take the wheel and start driving. And I'm not talking about adversarial motivation, I'm just talking about when things are failing. Or in a nuclear plant with OT technology, when the energy is not being produced and there's potential hazardous material, or hospitals and healthcare. So the list can go on, and I think we are moving in the right direction, adopting the technologies. We have regulations coming and compliances. But also we do need to have a cultural shift. And it's easy to have a cultural shift in a country like Estonia, not just because the people are very smart and open to technical innovation, but also it's a small country. 1.3 million people, it's an ideal proof of concept. You know, everybody is supportive, everybody is innovative, but applying it to, for example, US, 300 plus million people with different challenges, it requires some time, I would say.
Absolutely. And we'll delve into the strategy of how to address the sort of new strategic depth that we need to address when it comes to digital solutions. We'll do that a bit later. But Samuel, funnily enough, I mean, at the start, you guys changed the fact that we need physical money, but we still had a physical card. Now, with the recent directives, you have to do two-factor digital authentication for online shopping. So you as a card business, you're sort of being pushed one way and then the other way. How do you experience all of this in your role?
Yeah, so quite frankly, MasterCard as a company, we've sort of evolved with the digital ecosystem. So as you explained earlier, you know, about 50 years ago when we started out, it was all about physical acceptance. You actually had to be in residence, you know, tap your card, or you had to sign a check, you know, to be able to make transfer of payments. But then, you know, we've since evolved. We've sort of evolved into a more, you know, connected world. So in the old world, you only had about 4 key participants. You had the consumer, you had the issuer, you had the acquirer, and you had the merchant, right? You know, those 4 participants. But in this digital space, we've seen an explosion of interaction. We've seen an explosion of data. And with that comes a lot of threats. Obviously, comes with a lot of opportunities. Organizations can now do business more broadly. You know, you can now sort of make payments from the comfort of your home. You don't have to go out, you know, and to sort of power that network, you need a lot of, you know, partnerships, you need a lot of data. And as Saba mentioned, IoT is a really big thing right now. You've got fridges that can sort of communicate. You've got, you know, toasters that can communicate. All of that houses data, some of which are sensitive. So how do you secure that data? Not by securing transactions, you know, on a transaction by transaction basis. And this is where MasterCard as a company, we're sort of, you know, moving our strategy, not just securing transactions, because over the past 40, 50 years, we've been doing that very well. But how do you secure the digital ecosystem? That goes beyond securing just transactions, but securing interactions within that space. So what we see is, obviously, there's a lot of threat out there, and to be able to manage that threat, you need a lot of sort of, you know, threat intelligence. You need a lot of tooling. You know, we talked about, you know, physical devices as well. You know, there's loads of physical devices besides IoT. You've got your laptops, you've got your phones, you've got your driverless cars. You know, and
card readers.
Exactly. You know, you've got all of that, and that is a massive ecosystem. So there's definitely a lot of risk in the future. But I think understanding risk management, you know, how you can sort of gain intelligence from a wide global network such as ours to tackle that risk is what MasterCard is sort of, you know, enforcing.
I mean, I wanted to mention earlier that Shaba's house sounds pretty cool and complicated with all of the IoT stuff. The smart fridge would scare me because I think it would judge me for what's inside my fridge. But let's leave that be for another day. I mean, all of you are active internationally to varying degrees, but still you're very much looking beyond the borders of Tallinn and Estonia more widely. As you've expanded your businesses across borders, which factors have been not just the strongest, like the biggest hurdles? I'm sure we will all talk about regulations and all of that stuff, but also the strongest accelerators. Where was a country where it was particularly easy to set foot in, and why was that? Perhaps we can start, go from left to right again.
Yeah, honestly, we are not that international yet, but we have the ambition to be so. So basically, our first data center now is in Tallinn, and we are looking forward to expand the same concept now in other countries. But if you allow me just to a little bit describe what we actually are doing, I think we have built up really the top-notch data center, which is quite, if you look at the international standards, we don't kind of go beyond any of the standards. So basically, our energy efficiency usage is basically 1.2, which is really great. I mean, let's say if 1 unit is the energy the IT equipment is using, then only 0.2 is there for all the rest, the cooling, the lights on, the security systems. We use artificial intelligence, for example, to run our cooling. So basically the cool air is moved around, controlled by AI, or kind of the machine learning, we can say. Predictive maintenance is about there to launch. So there is many things actually you need to do. So forensics, how to really allow people in and people out, all the biometrics. So that's actually what creates the really great data center. So of course it wasn't exactly the answer to your question, but at least we look forward to replicate this concept, which is top-notch here now, to the other countries, and we'll do so.
Perhaps you can tell us more about what you're looking for in a country that could be a good host country for you to be based in. Is there a certain regulation that would keep you from being active in a country? Is it about, I mean, with the previous panel, we heard about how difficult it can be to just set up one single charging station. Is there something that would make it easier or harder for you to be active in a country?
Definitely, the regulation is very important. But for data centers, fortunately, it's not that strict from the kind of the regulatory side that either you can or you cannot enter there in the market. Of course, you need to then abide for certain regulations, the environmental, the data protection, all this. So basically, but for us at least, it seems like there is no problem to, at least in European side of the world, there is no problem at all to really replicate this concept. Just one thing to add about the electricity usage. Currently, the data centers globally are consuming about 2% of the whole electricity, actually. The other 2% is actually in the internet, so which connects them. So basically, that's huge. And that's why this energy efficiency and using only the green energy and all this stuff is so important. And that's actually one thing the governments ask. If you go somewhere and you want to build a data center, they immediately ask, so you have to abide to the ESG requirements and, of course, to use only the green energy.
I think, like what you just mentioned, the harmonization of European legislation helps you sort of navigate through different countries as well. Taavi, let's move on to you.
Yes, I think like we're active in 15 countries, mostly in Europe, but also in Africa and Asia and a few other places. And when selling the products and expanding the business in this heavily regulated business-to-business or business-to-enterprise market, what we have learned is that one common aspect is that in every country where we're entering, people are saying that this thing or this product might be allowed in other countries, but not in our country. And that's like a repetitive saying I keep hearing. Doesn't matter into which region we're expanding, they believe that they are so unique. Of course, like there are some legal differences everywhere, but there are principal assumption of the personal uniqueness, especially in the enterprise and like again AML and GDPR and other regulations, which are like massive things, make people to think that something which is built in other regions or other countries, it doesn't work or shouldn't work in our country. So that's kind of mental barrier. But what's really helping actually is also common stories, and as you mentioned, like Estonia being great small hub. In our case, what has worked really well, again, coming from the digital part of Estonia, like NATO Center of the Cyber Defense, and which was established more than like 15 years ago already. And this industry has been moving, and this kind of protection mechanisms have been improving over the time a lot, actually. And this kind of cooperation, country to country or NATO level cooperation, has helped this world to become safer place, or at least has prevented us to be less safer place, I think. But actually, the same success stories can happen in other industries, like in AML space, which is like 15 years behind the cyber defense, I think, for me, because the AML regulations are not as strong or as good, or like approach is not as good as in the cyber defense. But actually, these kind of stories, and what we did a few years ago, we built a union or collaboration between the Estonian banks.
The bridge.
The bridge, yeah. Bridge between the banks, which made these institutions to become into next level players in the AML space. And again, like learning from these former success stories of the NATO Defense Center and other similar stories, it makes it possible, makes it easier for small companies to expand the business and usage into other regions as well. And again, like learning the standards that colleagues here have seen, maybe like over and over coming up in their spaces, like in the AML and crime fighting, it's like 10 years behind, and this great way to learn actually from other like industries' learnings in that space as well.
Csaba, what are the main challenges but also opportunities in your experience?
It's a wide question. So
welcome. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Both.
So as Nortel, I believe we are lucky enough to be able to serve a very wide range of partners and clients. And I would not differentiate in regards of territory or nation or country. We're proud to provide for the largest online retailer mission-critical services. And we are also very proud to be there at the creation of a brand new cognitive city in the desert in Saudi Arabia. And also we are very proud to contribute to the governmental system, e-governance system in Estonia, and all of these 3 projects are 3 very distinguished projects that are unified by one common thing, which is actually our approach, how we do things. And our partners choose us because of the mentality, because of the values that we represent, and this is actually what we look for when we are entering into a partnership. So when we get in a partnership in an ideal situation, the partner is ready to change something. They want to move to the next stage. Typically, it's either a digital transformation, either a cyber digital transformation, or just a cybersecurity related topic, but they are at a certain level and they want to make the next step. So mindset-wise, we are talking about people who want to do something differently. It's not just yet another web application to do something. It's not just yet another data exchange. There is something that needs to be solved, the complex problem, how you relate with the data and how that data can create a better environment, a better business operation, have something meaningful impact. And we are happy to be able to provide services because actually we have this global experience from deploying a data center in the middle of a jungle. I'm not exaggerating. It's running by petrol generators to servicing clients like I just mentioned. So I think the mindset is the difference.
I was about to summarize that it seems, I mean, I asked about the biggest accelerator, but also the greatest hurdles. The greatest accelerator is pragmatism, which is what people probably appreciate most Estonians for as well. It's like the sort of, there's a Germanic appreciation for rules, but there's also a more Nordic, just let's get it done, let's go ahead and do it. And probably also the biggest hurdle is lack of pragmatism, you know, excuses finding. We can't do this because of privacy. We can't do this because of X, Y, Z. So I think this is an important aspect as well. Samuel, what are your last takes on this?
Yeah, so I think well, I'm not going to point out any particular countries, but I think where we've obviously done well is countries that have, sort of, as my colleague said, the right mindset. So yes. Culturally, they have to be able to, you know, absorb change, you know, and they have to be ready for it. They have to have the right infrastructure. Obviously, you know, to operate, you need the infrastructure, you need electricity, you need, you know, the talent as well to support the infrastructure. You also need funding, and I think that's where private, you know, public partnership comes into play, and where MasterCard is really good at in terms of, you know, developing these private, you know, public partnerships. And we've done this all over the world, you know, we've done this in Africa, we've done this in Asia. Yeah. More coming closer to home, we've done something recently with the Catalonian government, where we are providing services to small, medium-scale enterprises, and we're also providing digital awareness training for teens, particularly focusing on girls, you know, to sort of expand their studies in engineering science topics. So I think all those have to sort of come together in order for those economies to flourish. And as I said, MasterCard, we're very much, you know, in that space, you know, working with governments, working with public companies, collaborating and, and getting services out there, because I think there's always the case of the haves and the have-nots, and the haves would have to, bring the have-nots along in order for, us to have an inclusive digital experience. Yeah, I think.
I want to give everyone a last 2 sentences. It's a very simple challenge. We're about to break for lunch on this stage. If you had the option, the ability to have one question be discussed by the audience over lunch, what question would you like to give them for their lunch break? Don't know.
Yeah, it's actually, from me, it's very simple. If you keep your data only in public cloud, you should rethink, come to us and put your servers.
That's a very good question.
You will never forget it, so it's a good experience. And it's much cheaper, by the way.
Still looking for the question mark on that one. Tavi?
I would ask to discuss or fantasize, like if your goal would be to steal someone's money with their data, how would you do that? Be creative, and you will see how creative you can be and how many different ways you can figure out how to steal your friends or neighbors' data and money using digital and physical soft attacks against them. So I think it's a good discussion.
Csaba?
I might have a futurist question. Would you allow AI to control your government?
I don't think I'm going to go to sleep anymore tonight. Yes, Samuel?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really understanding that organizations are very good at protecting their perimeter, protecting your crown jewels, but do you really know who your third parties are, Who are your vendors, who are your partners? Because that is where your vulnerabilities lie, right? Because you've secured your perimeter, you've secured your castle. But then, because we live in this digital space where there's billions of connections, there's billions of partners, billions of participants, they bring in a lot of vulnerabilities into your environment, and we've seen that in recent cases of supply chain attacks. So how are you really going outside of your borders? How are you sort of gaining that intelligence to tell you, okay, where your risks are and where you should focus your priorities in the coming decade or so?
Wonderful. With this, dear audience, thank you very much, and join me in thanking the panelists for this lovely discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen.